I'm now going to move to giving some tips on how to make this work. If you're in a long distance relationship, how can you stay connected and how can you make the most of the situation that you're in? So the first one is structural, and of course, this won't be possible for everyone, but I really do think it helps if there is an end in sight. So I think that for most people, having indefinite, open-ended long distance is going to be really challenging, and that makes sense. It's hard to know what your future looks like together if it is a serious relationship and it's one that you're both serious about. It's hard to see how that is going to work in a way that's ever going to feel, structurally compatible if you are planning to live apart forever. Again, not everyone, and there will be people who make that work, but that's going to be a small minority of people. And for the vast majority of people, there's going to want to be some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. So it might be, for the next 12 months, work means that we're going to be in different cities. Absolutely fine. You can go into that with the mindset of this is going to be a challenging period, but then there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I think if you've just got month to month rolling, open-ended, long distance with no ability to really talk about the future or what happens on the other side of that, that can feel really stuck. And I think it can feel a bit overwhelming and you might feel a bit powerless if that's the situation that you're in. So I think in an ideal world, there would be an end date, at least a kind of broadly agreed or a theoretical end date to the long distance period. Short of that, and in addition to that, even if you do have an end date, I think that having very regular plans to be together, so to see each other, is a really good idea, and that makes it much more doable in the short term because you have something to look forward to. So say you've got to be long distance for the next 18 months because of work, but you've got in the calendar every month or 6 weeks or whatever that one of you will travel to the other or you'll both travel somewhere, but you have something to look forward to, and the actual time apart is not going to be that full 12, 18 months or whatever period of time it is. You have these shorter horizons, these little milestone moments that you can really look forward to. And I think that in having that, you actually have an opportunity to plan that and to connect through your joint excitement to see each other. And you might take that as an opportunity to plan a really exciting little trip together, or even if you're just visiting each other where you're living, making an occasion out of it so that it really does feel special and feels really connective when you do have that opportunity to come together. So having ideally a bookend at the end in sight for the long distance, but also having those shorter horizons of when you're next going to see each other, I think it's a really good idea. The next tip that I want to give you is to create rituals for connection. So of course, I've just spoken about actually having time to come together and see each other and be in each other's company, which is really important. But on a day-to-day basis, you are going to need to find ways to feel connected to them, notwithstanding the distance. So that might mean a morning text every day, or FaceTiming while you're eating dinner, or maybe you watch a show together. I've known friends in the past who were long distance and they would watch the same movie on Netflix and they'd FaceTime at the same time, so it feels like they were watching it together. Or you might play an online game together, or any number of things that can feel like there's this bond and this tether that keeps you feeling close to them despite the distance. I think that's really important, to have things that are little things like a morning text, like everyday stuff, and then maybe bigger things. So maybe on Friday nights you have dinner and you cook the same recipe and you Zoom or something. But having these things that feel like rituals that you both really prioritize and honor and look forward to and respect and cherish, that's going to help both of you to feel not only connected, but prioritized, and like the relationship is being prioritized. And I think that's really important as well. Related to that is you need to find ways to feel involved in the other person's life. So I remember when I was doing long distance, and this was probably 8 years ago now, I was studying on exchange in Singapore. My partner at the time was doing his master's in the UK. And so we were obviously in different countries, but we were both away from home and we were both in these new environments and we had all of these new friends and it was all very exciting. But it meant that we didn't know any of the people that either of us were, building these lives with, even though it was short term. My partner didn't know any of my new friends that I'd made and I didn't know any of his. And so when we'd talk, even though we were speaking regularly, we'd be talking about our day and we didn't have any context for each other's lives. I didn't know the places that he was going on a day-to-day basis. And so it was all very high level in terms of what we were sharing with each other, just because we didn't have that level of familiarity with the other's world because it was all very new. Now, if you do know each other's world, so if you're both home and you've been to each other's homes and you're hanging out with the same friends and going to the same places, that's going to be easier because you have more context to understand what they're up to and to feel like you're almost there through their descriptions and accounts of what they've been up to. But if there is some level of newness about the situation such that you don't have that context, you're going to need to find ways to really let each other in. And maybe that means giving more detail in storytelling than you otherwise would, because you don't have the luxury of that shorthand of just, I went to the cafe with these two people that you know really well and I can tell you the story about them without having to give all of the backstory. I think that when we're apart, and particularly, as I said, when there's a new environment, so if someone's gone and taken a job overseas, they're going to have to really invest in getting you up to speed with who their new colleagues are and what the boss is like and what they do for lunch and all of those things that will allow you to have a picture and feel involved in their life. Otherwise, it's really easy to just feel very disconnected and very far away and like you don't really have much insight or connection with what your partner is up to and where their life is at. And that can be a really hard feeling to be on either side of. Okay, and the last tip that I want to give you for navigating long distance is, this goes without saying, but communication is so important. So it's really normal to have bumps in the road for the connection to ebb and flow when you're apart. And as I said, you just don't have the luxury of proximity to keep the tank from drying up. I think that just being around each other gives us a base level of connection. And when we take that away, it's much easier for things to feel a little fractured or bumpy or disconnected. And so being able to bring that to each other and to share what we're feeling in a way that you're both really committed to making it work and finding ways to prioritize each of your needs, find solutions that work for both of you. That really needs to be a very clear and open channel of communication, because I think that if you internalize that and you don't want to say anything because you don't want conflict while you're apart, or you don't want to jeopardize what time you do have to talk to them, talking about heavy things, all of that I can totally understand. And at the same time, it's probably not going to help for you to be bottling up any concerns you have or feelings of loneliness or sadness or disconnection. You're much better off bringing those to your partner and finding some sort of way to navigate that works for both of you. So don't shy away from being honest about how you're going and how you're feeling. I think that is always important in relationships, but especially so when you're in a season of being apart and really needing to go above and beyond in order to nurture that connection and that trust and that sense of togetherness despite the distance.